Chapter 1 of Stories of Beowulf Told to the Children. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Stories of Beowulf Told to the Children by H.E. Marshall. Chapter 1. How Grendel the Ogre warred with the Dane folk. Long, long ago there lived in Daneland a king called Hrothgar. The old men of his country loved him, and bowed the knee to him gladly, and the young men obeyed him and joyfully did battle for him. For he was a king mighty in war, and valiant. Never a foe could stand against him, but he overcame them all, and took from them much spoil. So this king wrought peace in his land, and his riches grew great. In his palace there were heaped gold in rings and in chains, armor finely welded, rich jewels which glowed as soft sunlight. Then King Hrothgar looked upon this great treasure, and brooded thereon. At last he said, "I will build me a great hall. It shall be vast and wide, adorned within and without with gold and ivory, with gems and carved work. The fame of it shall spread over all the earth, and men shall sing of it for all time. And when it is built, therein shall I call all my warriors, young and old, and divide to them the treasure that I have. It shall be a hall of joy and feasting." Then King Hrothgar called his workmen and gave them commandment to build the hall. So they set to work, and day by day it rose quickly, becoming each day more and more fair, until at length it was finished. It stood upon a height vast and stately, and as it was adorned with the horns of deer, King Hrothgar named it Hart Hall. Then, true to his word, and well pleased with the work of his servants, King Hrothgar made a great feast. To it his warriors young and old were called, and he divided his treasure, giving to each rings of gold. And so in the hall there was laughter and song and great merriment. Every evening when the shadows fell, and the land grew dark without, the knights and warriors gathered in the hall to feast. And when the feast was over, and the wine cup passed around the board, and the great fire roared upon the hearth, and the dancing flames gleamed and flickered, making strange shadows among the gold and carved work of the walls, the minstrel took his harp and sang. Then from the many-windowed hall the light glowed cheerfully. Far over the dreary fen and moorland the gleam was shed, and the sound of song and harp awoke the deep silence of the night. Within the hall was light and gladness, but without there was wrath and hate. For far on the moor there lived a wicked giant named Grendel. Hating all joy and brightness, he haunted the fastness and the fen, prowling at night to see what evil he might do. And now, when night by night he heard the minstrel's song, and saw the lighted windows gleam through the darkness, it was pain and grief to him. Very terrible was this ogre Grendel to look upon. Thick black hair hung about his face, and his teeth were long and sharp, like the tusks of an animal. His huge body and great hairy arms had the strength of 10 men. He wore no armor, for his skin was tougher than any coat of mail that man or giant might weld. His nails were like steel and sharper than daggers, and by his side there hung a great pouch in which he carried off those whom he was ready to devour. Now day by day this fearsome giant was tortured more and more, for to him it was torture to hear the sounds of laughter and of merriment. Day by day the music of harp and song of minstrel made him more and more mad with jealous hate. At length he could bear it no longer. Therefore one night he set out, and creeping through the darkness came to Hart Hall, where, after the feast and song were done, the warriors slept. Peacefully they slept with arms and armor thrown aside, having no fear of any foe. And so with ease the fierce and savage giant seized them with his greedy claws. Speedily he slew 30 of the bravest warriors, then howling with wicked joy, he carried them off to his dark dwelling, there to devour them. Oh, when morning came, great was the moaning in Daneland. When the sun arose and shone upon the desolated hall, and the war-craft of Grendel was made plain, there was weeping. A cry of woe and wailing crept out over the moorland, and the woesome sound made glad the heart of the wicked one. But Hrothgar the mighty sat upon his throne downcast and sorrowful. He who was strong in war wept now for the woe of his thanes. With eyes dimmed and dark, in grief and rage, he looked across the wild, wide moorland, where the track of the monster was marked with blood, and he longed for a champion. But who would fight against an ogre? Before the thought the bravest quailed. Such a fight would be too loathly, too horrible. It was not to be endured. When night fell, the sorrowing warriors laid themselves down to rest with sighs and tears, in the bright hall that once had rung with songs and laughter. But the greedy monster was not yet satisfied. His work was not yet done. Stealthily through the darkening moorland, again the ogre crept until he reached Hart Hall. Again he stretched forth his hand, again he seized the bravest of the warriors, slew and carried them off to his drear dwelling. Then was there wailing and fierce sorrow among the mighty men. Yet there was none so brave that he would face and fight the demon foe. But each man swore that he would not again sleep beneath the roof of Hart Hall. So when evening fell, they departed every man to the dwellings around the palace, and the fair hall was left desolate. Thus Grendel, single-handed, warred against the Dane folk until the great hall, the wonder of men, was forsaken and empty. For 12 long years it stood thus, no man daring, except in the light of day, to enter it. For after the shadows of evening fell, Grendel was master there. And in that stately hall, when night was darkest, he held his horrid feasts. Only near to the throne, the carved gift-seat or throne of the Dane folk, where Hrothgar the king used to sit, and from whence he dispensed gifts to his people, there only he dared not go. Something sacred and pure was there, before which the wicked ogre trembled. Thus for 12 long years Grendel warred against Hrothgar and the Dane folk. He prowled through the misty moorland, lay in wait in dark places, slaying young and old. Many were the grisly deeds he did, many the foul crimes, and the mighty warriors, strong of heart against a mortal foe, were powerless against him. Downcast and sorrowful of heart, Hrothgar sat among his counselors. None among them knew how to give him advice or comfort. None knew how to deliver his land from the evil one. Then the minstrels made mournful songs, and far and wide they sang of how Grendel ever warred with Hrothgar. They sang of how year by year there was battle and wrath between the noble king and the Ogre of evil fame. End of chapter 1. Recording by Rhonda Fetterman.
Chapter 2 of Stories of Beowulf Told to the Children. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Stories of Beowulf Told to the Children by H.E. Marshall. Chapter 2. How Beowulf the Goth Came to Daneland. And now it came to pass that across the sea in far Gothland the songs of Grendel and his wrath were sung, until to Beowulf the Goth the tale of woe was carried. And Beowulf, when he heard of Grendel's deeds, cried out that he would go across the waves to Hrothgar the brave king, since he had need of men to help him. Now Beowulf was very strong in war, mighty among men. Of all the nobles of the Goths there was none so great as he. Much beloved too was he of Hygelac, king of the Goths, for they were kinsmen and good comrades. And because of the love they bore him, many prayed him to bide peacefully at home, but others, knowing his prowess, bade him go forth. Beowulf was eager for the contest, so taking with him 15 warriors and good comrades, he stepped into a ship and bade the captain set sail for Daneland. Then, like a bird, wind-driven upon the waves, the foam-necked ship sped forth. For 2 days the warriors fared on over the blue sea, until they came again to Daneland, and anchored beneath the steep mountains of that far shore. There, lightly springing to the shore, the warriors gave thanks to the sea-god that the voyage had been so short and easy for them. But upon the heights above them stood the warden of the shore. His duty it was to guard the sea-cliffs and mark well that no foe landed unaware. Now as the warriors sprang to shore, he saw the sun gleam upon sword and shield and coat of mail. What manner of men be these? He asked himself. And mounting upon his horse, he rode towards them. Waving his huge spear aloft, he cried as he rode onwards, "What men be ye who come thus clad in mail coats, thus armed with sword and spear? Whence cometh this proud vessel over the waves? Long have I kept watch and ward upon this shore, that no foe might come unaware to Daneland. Yet never have I seen shield-bearing men come openly as ye, and never have I seen more noble warrior than he who seems your leader. Nay, such splendour of armour, such beauty and grace have I not seen. But, strangers, travellers from the sea, I must know whence ye come ere ye go further. Ye may not pass else, lest ye be spies and enemies to Daneland. It were well that ye told me speedily." Then Beowulf answered him, "We are folk of the Goths, thanes of King Hygelac. In friendly guise we come to seek thy lord, King Hrothgar, the mighty chieftain. We have a goodly message to the famed lord of the Danes. There is no cause to be secret. Thou knowest if it be true or no, but we indeed have heard that among ye Danes there is a great and wily foe, a loather of valour, who prowleth terribly in dark nights, making great slaughter and causing much woe. Therefore have I come, for perchance I may be of succour to the noble King Hrothgar in his need." Fearless and bold, facing the band of warlike men, the warden sat upon his horse, and when Beowulf had ceased speaking, he answered him, "Ye come as friends, O bearers of weapons, O wearers of war garments. Follow me then, and I will lead you on. I will also give commandment to my men that they guard your ship where it lies by the shore until ye come again." So following the warden they marched forward. Eager they were for battle, eager to see the far-famed Hart Hall. And as they marched, their gold-decked helmets, their steel mail-coats, their jewelled sword-hilts flashed in the sunlight, and the clank and clash of weapons and armour filled the air. On and on they pressed quickly until the warden drew rein. "There," he said, pointing onwards, "there lies the great Hart Hall. No longer have ye need of me, the way ye cannot miss. As for me, I will back to the sea to keep watch against a coming foe." Then, wheeling his horse, he galloped swiftly away, while the Goths marched onwards until they reached the Hart Hall. There, weary of the long way that they had come, they laid down their shields, and leaning their spears against the wall, sat upon the bench before the great door. And as they sat there resting, there came to them a proud warrior. "Whence come ye with these great shields?" he asked. "Whence with these grey shirts of mail, these jewelled helmets and mighty spears?" "I am Hrothgar's messenger and servant, I who ask. Never saw I prouder strangers, never more seemly men. I ween it is not from some foe ye flee in fear and trouble, rather in pride and daring it would seem ye come to visit Hrothgar." Then answered Beowulf, "My name is Beowulf, and we are Hygelac's thanes. To thy lord the mighty Hrothgar we will tell our errand, if he will deign that we do greet him." The warrior bowed low, for well he saw that Beowulf was a mighty prince. "I will ask my lord the king," he said, "if so be thou mayst come to him, and to thee right quickly will I bear his answer." So saying he departed, and came to Hrothgar, where he sat among his earls. The king was now old and grey-haired, and sat amid his wise men bowed with grief, for there was none among them mighty enough to free his land from the Ogre. "My lord," the warrior said, and knelt before the king, "from far beyond the sea strange knights are come. They pray that they may speak with thee. These sons of battle name their leader Beowulf. Refuse them not, O king, but give them kindly answer, for by the splendour of their arms I deem them worthy of much honour. The prince who sendeth such warriors hither must be great indeed." "Beowulf!" cried Hrothgar. "I knew him when he was yet a lad. His father and his mother have I known. Truly he has sought a friend. And I have heard of him that he is much renowned in war, and that he hath the strength of 30 men in the grip of his hand. I pray heaven he has been sent to free us from the horror of Grendel. Haste thee, bid him enter, bid them all to come. I would see the whole friendly band together. Say to them that they are right welcome to the land of the Danes." The warrior bowed low. Then once more going to the door of the hall, he stood before Beowulf and his knights. "My lord," he said, "the king biddeth me to say to thee that he knoweth already of thy rank and fame. He said to you brave-hearted men from over the sea that ye are all welcome to him. Now may ye go in to speak with him, wearing your war trappings and with your helmets upon your head. But leave your shields, your spears, and deadly swords without here, until the talk be done." Then Beowulf and his warriors arose. Some went with him to the hall, others stayed without to guard the shields and weapons. Guided by the Danish warriors, the knights marched right through the great Hart Hall until they stood before the gift seat where the aged king sat. "Hail to thee, Hrothgar," cried Beowulf. "I am Hygelac's friend and kinsman. Many fair deeds have I done, though yet I be young, and to me in far Gothland the tale of Grendel's grim warfare were told. Seafaring men told that the great hall, so fair and well built, does stand forsaken and empty as soon as the shades of evening fall, because of the prowlings of that fell giant. Then, as we heard such tales, did my friends urge me to come to thee, because they knew my might. They had themselves seen how I laid low my foes. 5 monsters I bound, thus humbling a giant brood. Sea monsters I slew in the waves at night time. Many a wrong have I avenged, fiercely grinding the oppressors. And now will I fight against Grendel. Alone against the Ogre will I wage war. Therefore one boon I crave of thee, noble prince. Refuse it not, for thereto am I come from very far. I pray thee that I alone, having with me only mine own earls and comrades, may cleanse Hart Hall. It has been told to me that Grendel recketh not of weapons, for his hide is as of steel armour. Therefore will I bear neither sword nor shield, but I will grapple with the fiend with mine hands alone, and foe to foe we will fight to victory. And unto whomsoever it seemeth good to the Lord of life, unto him shall victory be given. If Grendel win, then will he fearlessly devour the people of the Goths, my dear comrades, my noble earls, even as aforetime he has devoured thy warriors. Then wilt thou not need to cover me with a mound, for the lone moor will be my burial place. Where ye track the footsteps of the Ogre stained with gore, there will he with greed devour my thanes and me. But if I die, then send back to Hygelac my coat of mail, for in all the world there is no other like to it. This is all I ask. Beowulf was silent, and Hrothgar the aged king answered him. O friend Beowulf, he said, thou hast sought us out to help us. Yet to me it is pain and sorrow to tell to any man what shame, what sudden mischiefs Grendel in his wrath have done to me. See, my palace troop, my war band hath grown small. Grendel has done this. In his prowlings he hath carried off my men, so that my warriors are few. Full oft, when the wine was red in the cup, my knights did swear that they would await the coming of Grendel, to meet him with sword thrust. So when night fell, they abode in the hall. But in the morning, when day dawned, my fair house was red with blood, and I needs must mourn the death of yet more gallant knights, must have fewer thanes to own my rule. But sit now to the feast, and eat with gladness, sure that victory will come to thee. So the Goths sat them down in the great Hart Hall, and feasted with the Dane folk. The mead cup was carried round, the minstrel sang of deeds of love and battle, and there was great joy and laughter in all the hall. End of chapter 2. Chapter 3 of Stories of Beowulf Told to the Children. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Stories of Beowulf Told to the Children by H. E. Marshall. Chapter 3 Beowulf telleth how he warred with the Seafolk. Now among all the joyous company who feasted and made merry in the Hart Hall, there was one who bore a gloomy face and angry heart. This was a knight named Hunferth. At Hrothgar's feet he sat in jealous wrath, for he could not bear that any knight in all the world should have greater fame than he himself. The praise of Beowulf was bitterness to him, and thus he spake in scoffing words. Art thou the Beowulf who didst contend with Breca on the wide sea in a swimming match? Art thou he who with Breca out of vain pride swam through the sea, and for foolhardiness ventured your lives in deep waters? No man, 'twas said, nor friend nor foe, could turn ye from the foolish play. 'Twas winter time, and the waves dashed with loud fury, yet for a week ye twain strove upon the waters. He overcame thee in swimming, he had more strength. Then at morning time the sea drave him to shore. Thence he departed to his own land, where he owned a nation, a town, and much wealth. Yea, in that contest thou didst not the better. Now, although thou art so splendid in war, I expect a worse defeat for thee, if thou darest to abide here the coming of Grendel. Friend Hunferth, said Beowulf quietly, thou hast spoken much of Breca and of our contest. Now will I tell thee the truth of the matter. Rightly I claim to have the greatest strength upon the sea, more skill than any man upon the waves. Breca and I, when we were boys, talked much thereon, and swore that when we were grown to men, we should venture our lives upon the sea. And even so we did. As we swam forth into the waves, our naked swords we held in hand. That was right needful to defend us against the whale fishes. Breca was not fleeter than I upon the waves. Strive as he might, he could not flee from me, and so for 5 nights upon the sea we swam. Then a great storm arose, and drave us asunder. Fierce and cold were the waves, dark and terrible the night. The north wind drave upon us till the ocean boiled in madness of wrath. Then, too, the anger of the sea monsters arose. Glad was I then that my shirt of mail, gold adorned and trusty, wrapped my body. For a spotted monster seized me fast in his grim grip, and dragged me to the floor of the sea. But I strove with him, and my bright blade was dyed in the blood of the sea brute. So I escaped me that time. Yet although one was slain, around me swarmed many another fearful foe. But my dear sword served me well. They did not have joy of their feast, the evil-doers. They did not sit around on the floor of the sea to swallow me down. Nay, rather, in the morning, put to sleep with the sword, they lay among the seaweeds on the shore, cast up by the waves. And never since upon the great waters have they troubled the sailors. Yea, in that contest I slew 9 sea-brutes. Never have I heard of a fiercer fight by night under the arch of heaven. Never have I heard of a man more wretched upon the waves. Yet I escaped. And when the sun at morning rose above the sea, the waves cast me upon the shore of Finland, spent and weary of my journey. I have never heard it said that thou, Hunferth, did make such play of sword. No, nor Breca, nor any of you. Ye have not done such deeds, but in sooth I would not boast myself. Yet I say unto thee, Hunferth, that Grendel, the evil monster, had never done so many horrors against thy king, that he had never brought such shame upon this fair hall, hadst thou been so battle-fierce as thou vauntest that thou art. Yea, he hath seen that he hath no need to fear the boasted courage of the Dane folk. So he warreth, and slayeth, and feasteth as he pleaseth. He looketh not for battle at the hands of the Danes. But I, a Goth, shall offer him war fierce and long, and after that, he who will may go proudly to Hart Hall. When Beowulf had finished speaking, there was a cry from all the thanes and earls. The hall rang with the sound of clashing armour and loud shouts as the Dane folk cheered the hero. But Hunferth, abashed, held his peace. Then forth from the bower came Wealhtheow, Hrothgar's queen. Stately and tall, and very beautiful she came, clothed in rich garments girdled with gold. A golden crown was upon her head, and jewels glittered about her neck. In her hand she held a great golden cup set with gems. First to King Hrothgar she went, and gave him the beaker. "Hail to thee," she cried. "Mayst thou have joy of the drinking, joy of the feast, ever dear to thy people." And Hrothgar drank, merry of heart, glad with the thoughts of the morrow. And through all the hall Wealhtheow moved, speaking gracious words, giving to each warrior, young and old, wine from the golden cup. At last she, crowned queen, courteous and beautiful, came to Beowulf. Graciously Wealhtheow smiled upon the Goth lord, holding the beaker to him. "I thank the Lord of all that thou art come to us," she said. "Thou art come, noble earl, to bring us comfort, and to deliver us out of our sorrows." The fierce warrior bowed before the beautiful queen as he held the wine-cup. He felt the joy of battle rise within him, and aloud he spake, I swear it when I did set out upon the deep sea, as I stood by my comrades upon the ship. I swear that I alone would go to the deed, or go down to death in the grip of the monster. As an earl, I must fulfill my word, or here in the Hart Hall must I await my death day." The queen was well pleased with the proud words of the Goth lord, and so in splendor and high state she moved through the hall till she came again to the gift seat, and there beside the king she sat. Then again in the hall there was the sound of merriment and laughter. The minstrels sang, and the earls told of mighty deeds until the evening shadows slanted along the wall. Then all arose. The sound of song and laughter was stilled. It was time to be gone. Farewells were said. Man greeted man, not knowing what the morning might bring forth. But all knew that battle was making ready for those who waited in that great hall. When the sun had gone down, and dark night covered all the land, ghostly creatures would creep forth to war in the shadow. So with grave words Hrothgar bade Beowulf farewell. "Good luck bide with thee," he said. "Into thy keeping I give the hall of the Dane folk. Never before did I commit it to any man. Keep it now right bravely. Remember thy fame, show thy great valor, and watch against the evil doer. If thou overcome him, there is no desire of thine that shall be unfulfilled, so that it lieth in my power to give it thee." Then Hrothgar and his band of warriors and thanes went forth from the hall, and Beowulf with his comrades was left to guard it. The beds were spread around the walls, and Beowulf prepared himself strangely for battle. His coat of mail, firmly wrought with shining rings of steel, he cast aside. He took his helmet from his head, and with his sword and shield and all his glittering war harness, gave it to the keeping of a servant. And thus, all unarmed, clad only in his silken coat, he proudly spake: "In warcraft I deem I am no worse than Grendel. Therefore not with the sword shall I put him to sleep, though that were easy. Not thus shall I take his life, for he is not learned in the use of war weapons. So without them we twain this night shall fight, and God the All-Wise shall give victory, even as it shall seem best to him." Having so spoken, Beowulf laid his head upon the pillow, and all around him his warriors lay down to take their rest. None among them thought ever again to see his own land, for they had heard the terrible death that had carried off so many of the Dane folk from Hart Hall. Little they thought to escape that death, yet so reckless were they of life that soon they slept. They who were there to guard that high hall slept, all save one. Beowulf alone, watchful and waiting for the foe, impatiently longed for the coming battle. End of chapter 3.
Chapter 4 of Stories of Beowulf Told to the Children. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Stories of Beowulf Told to the Children by H.E. Marshall. Chapter 4. How Beowulf Overcame Grendel the Ogre. And now all slept, save Beowulf alone. Then out of the creeping mists that covered the moorland forth, the evil thing strode. Right onward to the hall he came, goaded with fearful wrath. The bolts and bars he burst asunder with but a touch, and stood within the hall. Out of the dark Grendel's eyes blazed like fire. Loud he laughed, wild demon laughter, as he gazed around upon the sleeping warriors. Here truly was a giant feast spread out before him, and ere morning light should come he meant to leave no man of them alive. So loud he laughed. Beowulf, watchful and angry, yet curbed his wrath. He waited to see how the monster should attack, nor had he long to wait. Quickly stretching forth a fang, Grendel seized a sleeping warrior. Ere the unhappy one could wake, he was torn asunder. Greedily Grendel drank his blood, crushed his bones, and swallowed his horrid feast. Again the goblin stretched forth his claws, hungry for his feast. But Beowulf, raising himself upon his elbow, reached out his hand and caught the monster. Then had the giant felt fierce wrath and pain. Never before had he made trial of such a hand grip. In it he writhed and struggled vainly. Hotter and hotter grew his anger, deeper and deeper his fear. He longed to flee, to seek his demon lair, and there make merry with his fellows. But though his strength was great, he could not win free from that mighty grasp. Then Beowulf, remembering his boast that he would conquer the ruthless beast, stood upright, gripping the Ogre yet more firmly. Awful was the fight in the darkness. This way and that the Ogre swayed, but he could not free himself from the clutch of those mighty fingers. The noise of the contest was as of thunder. The fair hall echoed and shook with demon cries of rage, until it seemed that the walls must fall. The wine in the cups was spilled upon the floor. The benches, overlaid with gold, were torn from their places. Fear and wonder fell upon the Dane folk, for far and wide the din was heard, until the king trembled in his castle, the slave in his hut. The knights of Beowulf awoke, arose, drew their sharp swords, and plunged into the battle. They fought right manfully for their master, their great leader. But though they dealt swift and mighty blows, it was in vain. Grendel's hide was such that not the keenest blade ever wrought of steel could pierce it through. No war axe could wound him, for by enchantments he had made him safe. Nay, by no such honorable means might death come to the foul Ogre. Louder and louder grew the din, fiercer and wilder the strife, hotter the wrath of those who strove. But at length the fight came to an end. The sinews in Grendel's shoulder burst, the bones cracked. Then the Ogre tore himself free and fled, wounded to death, leaving his arm in Beowulf's mighty grip. Sobbing forth his death song, Grendel fled over the misty moorland until he reached his dwelling in the lake of the water dragons, and there plunged in. The dark waves closed over him, and he sank to his home. Loud were the songs of triumph in Hart Hall, great the rejoicing, for Beowulf had made good his boast. He had cleansed the hall from the Ogre. Henceforth might the Dane folk sleep peacefully therein. And so the Goths rejoiced, and over the doorway of the hall, in token of his triumph, Beowulf nailed the hand and arm and shoulder of Grendel. Then when morning came and the news was spread over all the land, there was much joy among the Dane folk. From far and near many a warrior came riding to the hall to see the marvel. Over the moor they rode too, tracking Grendel's gory footsteps, until they came to the lake of the water dragons. There they gazed upon the water as it boiled and seethed, colored dark with the poison blood of the Ogre. Then back with light hearts they sped, praising the hero. From north to south they cried, between the seas and all the world over, there is none so valiant as he, none so worthy of honor. With loosened rein they galloped in the gay sunshine, and by the way minstrels made songs and sang of the mighty deeds of the Goth hero, praising him above the heroes of old. In all the land there was song and gladness. Then from his bower came the aged king, clad in gorgeous robes. Behind him was his treasurer, the keeper of his gold, and a great troop of warriors. With him walked the queen, splendid too, in robes of purple and gold, while many fair ladies followed in her train. Over the flower-starred meadow they passed, stately and beautiful, until they stood before the hall. As Hrothgar mounted the steps, he gazed upon the roof shining with gold in the sun. He gazed too upon the hand and arm of Grendel. Great was his joy and gladness. Then the king turned to the people gathered there. "For this sight be thanks at once given to the All-Wise," he cried. "What sorrow and trouble hath Grendel caused me! When I saw my hall stained with blood, when I saw my wise men bowed with grief, broken in spirit, I hoped no more. I thought never in this life to be repaid for all the brave men that I have lost. Then lo! when my sorrow was dark, there cometh a young warrior, a youth mighty in battle, and he hath done the deed that all our wisdom was not able to perform." Then turning to Beowulf, the king stretched out his hand and cried, "Now, O Beowulf, greatest of fighters, henceforth will I love thee as a son. No wish of thine but I will grant it to thee, if it be in my power. Full oft of yore have I for lesser deeds given great rewards. Treasure and honor have I heaped upon knights less brave than thou, less mighty in war. But thou, by thy deeds, hast made for thyself a glorious name, which shall never be forgotten." Then Beowulf, proudly humble, answered, "It was joy to do the daring deed. Blithe at heart we fought the unknown one. But I would that thou thyself hadst seen the Ogre among the treasures of the hall. I thought to bind him on a bed of death, but in my hand he might not lie. He was too strong for me. His body slipped from my grasp. Nevertheless he left me with his hand and arm and shoulder. It is certain that now he lieth dead, and will never more trouble the land." There was joy among the heroes as Beowulf spoke, but Hunferth hung his head, and bit his lip in silence. He no longer had desire to taunt the hero, or make boast of his own war-craft. Shame held him speechless. And so through all that day the crowd came and went before the door of Hart Hall. Greatly did all men marvel at the fearful sight, at the war hand of the Ogre. The nails were like steel, the fingers like daggers, and the whole hide so hard that no sword, however finely welded, might pierce it through. It was indeed a great marvel. End of chapter 4. Recording by Rhonda Fetterman.